Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on how to improve your database hygiene program. A few housekeeping items before we get started. There's a chat feature in the lower corner of your screen. As we go through the webinar, feel free to post questions in the chat. We'll make sure we cover those at the end of the webinar. I'll be sending out the slides and the recording within 2 business days, and you'll have access to either go back and review or to be able to share with your team if there's anyone who wanted to attend and was unable to. And if you have any questions or you've got any feedback, you can email me directly. My contact information will be in the email, and it's on a slide at the end of the deck that we'll go over. A little bit about me. I'll be hosting the webinar. My name's Elizabeth Aaron. I'm the Group Account Director and a partner at Brilliant Metrics. I've been in marketing for more than 20 years with experience in both B2B and B2C. When I'm not leading our account teams, I spend time with my husband, our 2 kids, and our lab, Rosie, in our hometown of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. A little bit about Brilliant Metrics. We're a digital-first agency that serves the B2B market. Marketing leaders come to us when they want to grow their team's capabilities, knowledge, or technology to drive greater results and impact. Today, we're going to be talking about improving your database hygiene. We're going to start with a quick overview of the role of hygiene and database marketing. From there, we'll explore some of the common causes of dirty data and the impact it can have on marketing and your business overall. Next, we'll take a look at the 8 steps for addressing dirty data. And because you can't improve what you don't measure, we'll wrap up the webinar with examples of KPIs for measuring database quality. As a reminder, please post any questions in the chat and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. So let's jump in. To identify how to improve the quality of your database, we need to understand the role of data hygiene within your larger database strategy. Database marketing is essential to your business. Overall, it's the systematic approach to gathering, consolidating, and processing both contact information and prospect data. And it's made up of 2 core components, strategy and hygiene. And it is arguably the most valuable asset an organization has. Which is interesting when you think about it, because very few companies have a budget or a plan for maintaining its integrity. That is why ensuring that the data is accurate and actionable is one of the biggest challenges facing organizations today, and probably why you're here. So congratulations on taking the first step to protect one of your company's most critical assets. Database marketing begins with strategy. Without strategy, you've just got a whole lot of pointless data. Think about it. You're collecting data like name, address, phone number, and other customer details. Then you add to it, capturing buying information and customer preferences. You have the data, but without a plan to use it, what good is it? With the right database strategy, you can create a personalized experience for your customers. And the right strategy can lead to improved conversion rates, increased average order, better pricing strategies, better customer service interactions, which all leads to an increased return on marketing investment. And while database marketing begins with strategy, the effectiveness of your strategy begins with database hygiene. Businesses of all shapes and sizes make data-driven decisions every day, and a surprising number of people make critical business decisions based on data that has never been checked for quality. According to the Global Data Management Report, 72% of business leaders say that the rapid push towards digital transformation has made companies more reliant than ever on data when it comes to making key business decisions. The problem is 55% of those same survey respondents said they lack trust in their data assets. And they estimate that 32% of their data is inaccurate. Think about it. If we make decisions using faulty data, untrue data, defective data, unreliable data, incorrect data, wrong data, will our lead generation programs be effective? Will our sales outreach be efficient? Will we be successful? Some argue that dirty data is actually worse than no data at all. Mitesh Korea, the chief technology officer of an Austin-based insurance company, was quoted as saying, "Having dirty data can lead people to make bad decisions by putting trust and faith in inaccurate information while ignoring other, better sources of information. It's garbage in, garbage out." The problem is so bad that data quality has become corporate America's dirty little secret. Poor data quality is arguably one of the largest hidden costs of business. Numerous studies support this claim, including one by Artemis Ventures that showed poor data quality is costing the U.S. economy a staggering $3.1 trillion a year. According to Experian, dirty data costs the average business between 15 and 25% of their revenue each year. Think about your revenue number. Now apply that percentage. That's not a small number. So how is it that some incorrectly formatted data, a missing digit from a phone number or an invalid email address, can be costing you so much? Dirty data is impacting your business. Marketers and salespeople rely heavily on huge volumes of customer and sales data in order to be able to tailor campaigns and promote their products and services. The problem is that data changes rapidly, so much so that it's considered the new norm. A recent report from Gartner showed that for B2B data, the decay rate is estimated to be 70.3% per year. Take a moment to pause and consider those implications. This means if sales and marketing professionals are sending the wrong message to the wrong contact in 7 out of 10 cases. But it's not just outdated information that's impacting your business. Inaccuracies in the data are contributing to the dirty data as well. A Zoom info statistic shows just how costly dirty data can be. Up to 25% of B2B database contacts contain inaccuracies, causing 40% of business objectives to fail. Why do they fail? Because contact and account data fuels everything we do as marketers, from buyer personas to personalized email campaigns to targeted advertising. None of that is possible without data. Marketing campaigns count on clean data. If we send an email to the wrong address, we use the wrong name, or we target someone based on an old job title, not only is it embarrassing, but our efforts are ineffective. Which is why when a quarter of the contacts in our database have inaccurate information, our business objectives fail. When CRM prospect data is missing or wrong, it hurts. The latest reports show that your sales and marketing departments lose approximately 546 hours annually due to the use of bad data. In other words, every rep wastes 27% of their time. This is because every minute sales spends hunting for missing information is time they are not spending on revenue-generating activities. If left unchecked, dirty data can render your CRM useless. We covered the immediate results of wasted time and lost opportunities, but what about long-term consequences? If our data quality is low, the decisions we make based on that data will be ineffective. Our forecasts will be wrong. And what about our outreach programs? Bad data will result in email deliverability problems and domain blacklisting, further dampening our impact. When the data is wrong, we miss an opportunity to engage. Like when a new product or release is available, bad data means we're missing customers who should be updated. No matter the size of your business, keeping your database fresh, constantly adding to it and nurturing it is absolutely essential to your business success. That is why today we're going to focus on keeping the data clean through a database hygiene program. But before we do that, let's take a look at the different types of dirty data and the 13 most common causes. So just what is causing all of that dirty data? You can fit it into 13 different buckets. And it's important to understand these causes so that you can address them in your data hygiene plan. We'll go over each one individually. However, I've outlined them here so that you can use this as a reference sheet when you're doing your own data cleanup. It's not surprising that human error represents the single most common cause of dirty data. A seemingly innocuous spelling error can result in a lost lead and thousands of potential dollars of unrealized revenue. According to Experian, human error influences over 60% of dirty data. Many of your data entry processes require manual input of data, and that can cause errors. The errors get worse if the people inputting the data have no technical knowledge or understand why it's being collected. Lack of knowledge on what value to input in and what field will lead to useless information will then get passed on to the rest of the organization. Missing data is just what it sounds like. and data fields that don't have a value. In some cases, this is because you have fields on forms that are not required, and so the information is missing when the form is submitted. In some cases, it's unknown information that's skipped over during manual entry. I have a client, actually have a couple of clients, this is not the first time I've heard this story, that have an old school salesperson that was then forced to use a new CRM system rather than their trusty Rolodex, or I don't know, however they were keeping track of this information. And so when it came time to convert the contacts over, they, and this gentleman in particular, entered the bare minimum information. And he left a lot of his knowledge about the customer, the stuff that really mattered, off the record. No one else in the organization had access to it. And now you've got a record with a bunch of missing data. The third cause of dirty data is ambiguous data, data that's just either too broad to decipher any real significance. Number 4 is incomplete data. That's data that's been left blank. Without it, some of the functions in the marketing and sales department will not work efficiently. Number 5 is duplicate data, and that's just duplicating customer records. It can lead to really high costs within the company. It doesn't just apply to customer records, though. This can happen with products as well. If you have an excess of an inventory when there really isn't one, it can hamper your procurement decisions. When it comes to the CRM records, a lot of times you're paying for the number of records in your database. So when you have duplicate records, you're paying for records you don't need, and you're increasing your monthly subscription costs. Number 6 is incorrect data. This kind of data occurs when, during input, the creation of values are outside of a valid range. It could also be due to variations in spelling, typos, formatting problems. Incorrect data often results in the wrong interpretation of data. Number 7 is inaccurate data. It's data that can be correct, but inaccurate. This can cause unwanted interruptions in your business. For example, this can happen when customers fail to input some data when filling out online forms. Some of the customers key in inaccurate data either because they don't want to share the information or by mistake. And when they do that, it puts your decision-making capabilities at a disadvantage. Number 8 is inconsistent data. This happens when the same value of data is stored in different locations, causing redundancies and inconsistencies. For example, an organization has company information in different non-synced systems or apps. We see this a lot with companies that have a CRM system and a marketing automation system that aren't synced together. Number 9 is storage failures. The hardware failure can also cause data corruption or loss, and that can lead ultimately to loss of revenue. Data decay is the 10th reason, and it's another major cause of dirty data. In some cases, this is data that expires after a period of time. In other cases, it's data that's no longer true. For example, when a customer changes their phone number or moves to a new location, this impacts B2B in a big way because B2B data decays at a rate of about 70% per year. Data decay is a known issue that every business goes through. If 70% seems high, think about it in this context. Zoom Info released these stats on what contributes to B2B data decay. And when you take a look at them, 40% of email users change their email address at least once every 2 years. 15% of email users change their email address 1 or more times a year. 20% of all postal addresses change every year. 18% of telephone numbers change every year. 21% of all CEOs change every year. Between 25 and 33% of email addresses become outdated after a year. And 60% of people change job titles within their organization each year. Now, think about this in context of COVID. We've seen more change than ever before as people have left the job market, started a new job, or begun working from home. The decay affects B2B at a higher rate because the change is occurring at a higher rate. Number 11, dirty data can also occur when organizations are linking data across sets without a unique identifier. If there's no unique identifier for the data, linking the data can create problems. These problems include repeated entries and combined as a result of either minor errors or from that missing information. Number 12 is poor interdepartmental communication, and that's involved in about 35% of inaccurate data records. And finally, Inadequate data strategy impacts about 28% of dirty data. Today, I'm going to give you the information you need to develop your own strategy and address each and every one of these causes. So, how do you get rid of the dirty data? The answer is a database hygiene program. It is clear that data is one of the most critical assets in the 21st century. Unfortunately, ensuring that the data is correct and actionable is one of the biggest challenges for organizations today. That is why database hygiene is so important. Data hygiene is the continuous practice of eliminating dirty data to maintain a clean database. The objective of data cleaning is to fix any dirty or bad data. This can be data that's incorrect, inaccurate, incomplete, formatted wrong, duplicate data, or even data that just isn't relevant to the data set. Cleaning the data is typically accomplished by replacing, modifying, or even deleting any data that falls into one of these categories. There are 8 steps for addressing dirty data, and it begins by getting organizational buy-in for this initiative. While poor data quality already costs organizations millions of dollars every year, many still haven't made the connection between data quality improvement and enhanced business results. Prioritizing data within the organization has to come from the top down. Maintaining an accurate database is complex, and it requires input and attention from a lot of different people within the organization. This doesn't happen without orchestration and support from leadership, and it's your job to make the case. You can do that by tying the dirty data back to the impact it's having on strategic business objectives. Despite the scary numbers associated with bad data, it's often difficult to convince executives to get on board with implementing a data management program. When this is the case, creating a compelling story for why data management is critical to your organization's growth and success involves putting dollar signs in front of the dirty data. You need to justify the need for data management by identifying the areas in which the business is leaving money on the table. This often includes lead scoring, lead management, lead nurturing, or useless data, which impacts the cost of your CRM. If you're paying for a database based on the number of contacts and you have duplicate contacts, then you're paying for contacts you don't need. Getting those duplicate records out of the system will lower the costs associated with your CRM, your marketing automation, or both. To help make the case for data hygiene resources, look inside your own database. What's your bounce rate? Have you seen a decrease in brand affinity? Is your MQL to SQL conversion rate decreasing? Is your time to close increasing? Has the number of unsubscribes increased? Each of these could be the result of bad data. Quantify these numbers to help give the executive team the proof they need to approve these resources. Another thing to consider is the cost of quality, also known as the 110-100 rule. It's developed by George Labovitz and Usain Chain, and it talks about how prevention is less expensive than correction, and correction is less expensive than failure. According to the 110-100 rule, the cost of preventing bad data is $1. The cost of correcting existing problems is $10, and it costs $100 if you do nothing. It would make more sense to invest $1 in prevention than spend $10 on correction. Furthermore, it makes more sense to spend $10 on correction than spending $100 at the event of failure. The cost of failure is the result of not dealing with the problem before the customer experiences it, and it's often more significant than we realize. Failure to deal with bad data impacts the performance of all of your marketing channels and can also impact brand reputation and direct sales. Once you have approval, you need to develop the plan. But before you do that, you need to understand where your data is stored and what shape it's in. You want to perform an audit to locate all of your existing data, because before you can clean up the data, you have to understand it. You'll want to locate all of the different places it's stored. This can be hard drives, laptops, on-premise servers, in the cloud. As an added bonus, knowing the locations of the data will come in handy if you ever receive a request for a record to be removed under GDPR, which requires you to delete all of the data associated with that contact. Once you locate where the data is stored, you want to review the data to understand what information you have and how it's classified. You can understand what information you have by asking questions like, what type of information have you been gathering and how is it formatted? Consider basic contact information. For first name, is it a separate field for first name and last name, or is it a combined field for both? You have a phone number, but is it a company phone number, a direct line, or a mobile number? And is it a text field, a numeric field, or a custom validation field that was built to only accept valid phone numbers? Understanding this and where this data is stored is important because it's going to help you identify where some of those breakdowns are occurring and how you're getting bad data. The other thing you want to look at is, how have you been gathering the information? Has it been entered by customer service? Was it synced from another database? Was it submitted via a form that a customer filled out online? Or is it data that you mined or purchased from somewhere? As you answer these questions, think back to the different ways that data can be dirty and the 13 causes of dirty data. Do any of them apply to your data? By understanding how the information got into the system or systems, you can start to identify and make note of where the dirty data is coming from and ideas for fixing it once and for all. Trust me, these observations are going to come in handy later. You're also going to want to understand how the data is classified. This is going to help you prioritize what needs to be addressed first. Business critical information should be the first priority when you implement your data cleansing strategy. From there, you want to make sure you understand what information is needed for compliance and that you have the right audit trail for that data. And finally, if the data is redundant or obsolete, you want to delete it. So many organizations are afraid to delete data, but if it's wrong or outdated, what good is it to you? Deleting dirty data is necessary for a clean database. Once you've completed your data audit, you want to get alignment from anyone involved in updating customer information or inputting the data. The point of this alignment is to understand what data is being collected, how it's being collected, and how it's being used. This is often a conversation between marketing, sales, and customer service. However, there may be other departments that need to be consulted. This is crucial as each of these departments often use different platforms for points of entry. Sales often uses a CRM like Salesforce or Pipedrive or HubSpot, while marketing tends to rely on a marketing automation platform like Marketo or Mautic or Eloqua. Each department tends to speak their own language, and each system tends to have their own data standards and formats. Let's review a common example. Sales is using Salesforce to enter a lead after a trade show. This is being done manually using a business card that was shared at the booth. In the second example, the prospect provided the information via a form submission through the marketing automation platform. Comparing the two records, we see a lot of differences. The information pulled from the business card has a lot more formal information, like full name and job title. In the form submission, the prospect referred to himself as Jim. During data entry, sales left the S off of, you can see right here it's missing, left the S off of Rogers in the email address. Marketing won't be able to use this information to retarget the prospect, and none of the emails will go through. In addition, if email is a unique identifier in this case, which it typically is, sales may have either just created a duplicate record, or if a record, this form submission happens after the fact, that will then create a second record that will not be connected in the two systems. You'll also notice that the sales rep entered a state when they entered this record, which is really important to them because lead assignments for this company are based on territory. However, our marketing form doesn't gather that information. By taking the time to understand what data is being collected and how it's being used, it's possible for the organization to align on standards and best practices for inputting and updating customer records. And it can be done without restricting or limiting the users. This is also a great time to explore integrations between these systems. Serious decisions say that companies that integrate their database boast conversion rate increases of up to 12.5%. Once you have an understanding of the current state of your database and alignment on how the data will be used, it's time to develop your data screening plan. A data screening plan is the process of catching errors during input. They say an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, and that's what you're doing in this step. You're using the 13 causes of dirty data we discussed earlier to identify opportunities to improve the data at input. A data quality plan is a project plan for improving the quality of your data. It should identify which types of data will be targeted and the biggest threats to quality within the data set. It should also identify which data cleansing tactics and techniques will be applied and which software tools will help support the process. Your plan should also establish the roles and responsibilities, along with a clear definition of success of your data cleansing initiative. The data screening plan will use the information gathered in the initial audit to identify the type and location of the data you want to target. You'll tackle the cleanup process based on how you prioritized it. You want to do business critical data first, then the data that's required for compliance, and then the data that's unnecessary or redundant needs to be removed. Review the data and determine which causes of dirty data are impacting the data set. Remember the notes I recommended you take during your initial audit? This is where you're going to be using those. These notes, combined with feedback from the team on process and pain points, will help to determine what data is wrong and where the data are occurring. Ideas for addressing these errors at the point of entry are covered under the standardization and validation section that we'll get to in just a minute. But before we get there, let's talk about the 6 dimensions of data quality. Data quality may be easy to recognize, but it's difficult to determine. This is because the same, and I'm using air quotes here, the same data can be fine in one context, but not in another. You can't rely on just one metric to measure data quality. Instead, you want to consider multiple attributes of the data to get the correct context and the measurement approach to data quality. We do this using the data quality dimensions to capture the attributes that are specific to how you will be using the data. There are 6 dimensions. Completeness is when data records are full, but not too full, and contain the right information you need to draw conclusions. This is a great example of less is more. Just because you can gather data doesn't mean you should. If it's not data you're going to be using, you want to leave it out of your database. It only introduces an additional point of unnecessary failure. Accuracy is when a measured value matches the actual or true value, and it contains no mistakes such as outdated information, redundancies, or typos. For timeliness, it's important to collect data in a timely manner in order to effectively track changes and know that the data is recent. This is an example of data of the value being relative. You can't put a specific timeline on this. Let's consider email as an example. An email that's been in your database for 3 years could be accurate because the prospect is still in the same position at the same company, whereas their counterpart at a competitor who just filled out a form a month ago already started a new job, and that initial email from the form submission is no longer timely. Uniqueness indicates if it's a single record instance in that data set. This is the most critical dimension for ensuring there is no duplication or overlap in your data set. Data duplication causes a whole array of problems. When the same data gets stored in multiple locations, it results in the use of unnecessary storage space, which I think I've mentioned twice now. But worse than that is the confusion it can cause. Imagine we have a prospect's phone number in 2 different systems. It gets updated in one, but not the other. How do we know which one is right? The 5th dimension is consistency. The data has no contradictions in your database. Looking back at our earlier example, the first name of James in Salesforce and Jim in the marketing automation platform is an example of inconsistent information. This dimension represents if the same information stored and used at multiple instances matches. And finally, validity. This can also be called data integrity. Having a high rate of validity means that all the data aligns with your established formatting rules. Same fields are mandatory in all systems. Fields use the same data type in all systems. So for example, you don't have a phone number listed as a numeric in one system and a text field in another. Rounding percentages go to the nearest whole number, and your dates are all formatted the same. Which one of these should you focus on? That depends on who you are and how you're going to be using the data. For example, patient data in healthcare must be complete, accurate, and available when required. For a marketing campaign, customer data needs to be unique, accurate, and consistent across all engagement channels. Once you have an understanding of the current state of your database and a plan to screen the data against the 6 dimensions of data quality, it's time to take action. And that action starts with standardization. A lack of standardization creates a ripe breeding ground for dirty data infestations. Standardization rules go a long way towards preventing dirty data. Standardizing data as it's captured is one of the easiest ways to enhance the consistency and uniformity of data collected by your organization. This means applying data entry standards, such as requiring specific data fields to be completed in a valid format before the data is submitted to your organization or added to a database. Consider which of your input fields should be standardized and then apply them to all systems, both internal and customer facing. In general, all numbers, monetary values, and other nominal values should be converted to a consistent representation. Case sensitivity should be eliminated unless absolutely necessary. You want to get rid of salutations such as Miss or Mrs. Spelling should be normalized according to one standard dictionary, and abbreviations like avenue, street, and parkway should be converted to their long form, or they should be used. You can use them or not. You just need to be consistent across applications. You can also improve data quality by validating the data. Data validation is a process for making sure that entries into a database are both meaningful and correct. In other words, data validation helps prevent dirty data from being entered into the system in the first place. There are two ways to manage this process: at the point of entry and when the record is saved. At point of entry, take advantage of validation rules. A lot of systems offer pre-built validation, like requiring a properly formatted email address. In some cases, your CRM or marketing automation platform may also allow you to build custom validation. Here are a few examples of point of entry validation. You can enforce a 2-character US state or Canadian province abbreviation by displaying an error message if, Mass is entered rather than Massachusetts or rather than MA, for example. You can prevent users from taking shortcuts and entering only the 7-digit portion of a telephone number that's within their area code. You can require proper formatting for ID numbers. If it's an EIN number, make sure that it has the proper formatting. If it's a social security number, you can use the little dashes to help them understand exactly how many numbers should be in there. If a sales opportunity was lost, the salesperson must enter the reason it was lost. Why we lose deals is very valuable information for both sales management and for the marketing team. You can prevent a salesperson from entering an opportunity close date that's in the past. If a salesperson edits an opportunity that has a past close date, you can require them to update the close date with a future date. You want to disallow discounts over a certain percentage. You can display an error message if the discount added to a product line exceeds a specified discount limit. That can help prevent too steep of discounts being made. Validation can also include user management, like only allowing the record owner to change certain fields within a record. And finally, if you're importing data into your CRM and marketing automation, you want to make sure that you implement a data cleansing process prior to the data import. Brilliant Metrics actually offers a really handy tool called CRM Tidy. You can find it in the footer of our website, and that allows you to upload a file for free, and it will convert it over, getting rid of title case, making sure everything's not all caps, standardizing state abbreviations. There's a whole list, and as you go into the tool, you actually have the ability to pick what you want cleaned up in the format that you want it to be in. Data can also be validated when the record is saved. Third-party integrations, which are typically tied to your CRM solution, can be set up to validate, clean, or append the data when the record is saved. Examples of some of these integrations include Experian, who offers address, email, and phone validation; Data Groomer, which offers duplication management as well as address, email, and phone validation; Demand Tools, which can help to normalize your data; and Zoom Info, which offers both duplication management and data normalization. One of our favorite validation techniques doesn't actually require a third-party tool. You simply need to send an email. By sending a confirmation email for every form submission, you get real-time feedback on the validity of an email address. When combined with an email hygiene program that removes bounce or inactive emails, you can keep your email database fresh. Despite the looming potential of enrichment and data cleansing systems, less than half, only about 46% of sales professionals are using tools to automatically enrich, append, clean, or dedupe leads before they're entered into the database. Without dedicated systems in place, dirty data is bound to spread like wildfire, and that's just at the point of entry. Validation addresses the data when the record is created, but what about the data that's already in your database? You can still end up with dirty data even if you only ever get good data, and that's because the data can change. According to Dun & Bradstreet, every 30 minutes, 120 company addresses and 75 phone numbers change, 20 CEOs leave their jobs, and 30 new startups get launched. Imagine tracking and changing those data points manually every 30 minutes of your workday. That would be impossible. So don't, or at least not manually. You can automate your data cleansing using third-party tools to update records in real time. Now, you may be asking, wait a second, what's the difference between this and validating the record? And the difference here is the timeline. Data validation happens at the point of entry or upon save, while data automation can include validation or augmentation that happens anytime after the record has been created, and it happens on a cycle or a regular cadence. By using third-party tools to update contact records, you'll avoid chasing dead-end leads, and more important, avoid losing the trust of your customers. When it comes to your customers, the only constant is change. Manual data cleansing is labor-intensive and uneconomical. It's well worth the time and effort to invest in systems that automatically enrich, append, clean, and dedupe the data. Software technologies that automate the data cleansing process will help your organization accelerate the development of insights and reduce the cost of maintaining high-quality data sets. These automations can be executed using regular expressions or regex functions, which are scripts that check for patterns in strings of text and execute predefined operations on them. Regex can be used to clean and transform data in a variety of different ways, ensuring its quality and preparing it for use with other business analytics applications. There are a number of different data cleaning tools out there, and some are easier to use than others. The tools I mentioned in the validating at save slide will work for data automation and are both user-friendly and not cost prohibitive. Post-implementation, you're going to want to track the impact of your database hygiene program and what it's had on your overall database quality. Because the measure of success is not whether you have a tough problem to deal with, but if it's the same problem you had last year. When measuring database quality, we can do this both qualitatively and quantitatively. To qualitatively measure the impact of your database hygiene program, you want to ask yourself these 4 questions. Does the system detect or identify and remove or even correct major errors and inconsistencies? Does the system successfully use tools, scripts, and automations to reduce manual inspection of data? Is the system improving the overall quality of the data? Are better decisions being made since the system was introduced? To communicate the value and track your progress, you want to focus on qualitative metrics. You can combine any of the 6 data quality metrics to assess the quality of your data, or use other key metrics to tie back to business objectives. Here are a few examples. You can measure the data quality dimension of completeness by measuring the number of empty values within a data set. A reduction in this number is a sign of improvement. You can measure the ratio of data errors, and that will tell you if your data is accurate. You can measure this by dividing the total number of errors by the total number of items. To measure accuracy and timeliness, you can look at email bounces. You can monitor the number of duplicate records to help you understand how unique your data is. You can look at the accuracy of your MQLs, and which will provide insight into the completeness, accuracy, and timeliness of your data. You can measure this by implementing a feedback loop and tracking the number of MQLs accepted by the sales team. The number of active subscribers will tell you about the timeliness of your data, and you can measure that by looking at how many of your email subscribers have visited the website within a specified period of time. Another metric that ties back to business objectives is the data storage costs. Reducing this cost impacts operational costs, which impacts bottom line results. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's a good place to start. Look to your own business initiatives and see how and where you can create measurements that show the impact your data cleansing plan has had on the organization. A few key takeaways before we wrap up today. A solid database strategy will impact the entire organization. It greatly improves your decision-making capabilities. It drives faster customer acquisition as you become more efficient at acquiring new customers and retargeting past customers. It saves resources, it boosts productivity, and it increases revenue from improved response rates. Once you have executive buy-in, you start at the beginning, your data sources. It's hard work, but by understanding the data and creating a solid plan supported by controls and processes that allow you to work smarter and not harder, by standardizing the data and using automations and integrations to do the heavy lifting, you will see improvements. But it's bigger than one department, and it is more than one mass cleanse. It is an ongoing process that extends across the organization. Simply outlining these procedures isn't enough to ensure an optimized and useful database going forward. You have to communicate these points across your business and guarantee that everyone across the board is following these standardized rules. That is what's going to remove the need for another massive cleanse in the future. Now, let's open up the webinar and see what questions we have.
While you guys put in your questions, I'm going to start us off with one. Elizabeth, who do you think, I mean, this is a, whole company buy-in, but who should own these? Who should own the hygiene?
That's a good question. So if you're a company that's never done data hygiene before, it's probably going to be someone in marketing or sales. It's got to be someone who has some sort of skin in the game when it comes to the database. And obviously you want to get anyone else who's got access to the data and is working with it, you want to get them involved. That's kind of the starting off point. But more and more companies, as their executive and leadership teams are seeing the value in this, more and more companies are actually bringing in specific data scientists to manage not only database, but overall analytics. There's so many opportunities in your database, and not just in your CRM or your marketing automation. If you've got any sort of business intelligence, you've got any sort of ERP systems, there's so much data in there that can be driving your decision making, having someone that's able to come in and analyze that. So long story short, in the short term, it's typically someone in sales or marketing. But again, it should be a company-wide initiative. And ideally, you bring in an expert in this area to not only manage the database, but to be able to draw the insights that are going to lead to better business decisions. Any other questions?
I have another one while we wait for some more to come in. When you talked about, to not have to have another large database cleanse, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be looking at that. Like, you can bring in an outside person, but there's really nothing like your salesperson looking and going, hey, something's not quite right here. Is there a schedule for when that salesperson should be looking at the database as a whole?
Well, I think if you can get some of those metrics in place that we talked about, you can monitor those trends. If they're staying consistent or improving, then things are going well. If those numbers start to decline, that becomes an indicator that something's not right with the data, and you're going to want to come back and visit. That being said, if you really follow this process, if you get a clear understanding of how people are using the data, what data you're collecting, and then you find those opportunities to standardize it and to validate it, you are going to reduce so many of those errors going in. And you should see those improvements. That being said, you integrate a new system, again, you want to bring that into the fold. You want to make sure it's using the same formatting or the same integrations. But keep an eye on the metrics. If they start to decline, then you're going to want to revisit and get to the root of the problem. Okay, where are we having bad data? Where is it occurring? And what's the cause of it? And then how can we address it? Again, in a way that you don't have to manually go in and clean it. What systems can you put in place? What processes can you put in place to address it?